Okay, so in the first part of this intro to dialectical materialism, I talked about how the first major characteristic of diamat is that it takes material reality, material conditions, especially economic factors and economic needs, as the most important elements when you're trying to study, when you're trying to analyze, or when you're trying to understand society and reality as a whole. So in this second part, I'm going to talk about the second major characteristic, still using Claude Ake. And the second major characteristic of dialectical materialism is the emphasis it places on the dynamic nature of reality. This just means the propensity for reality to change. Dialectical materialism refuses to look at aspects of the world as being different from each other or being static. It encourages us, when studying reality and society, to think of the world as being continuous, with an awareness that this continuity is very complex and problematic. Dialectical materialism treats the world as something that is full of movement and dynamism. Reality is not static. The dynamism of reality and society is because of the contradictions that exist everywhere. The world is full of contradictions. Dialectical materialism proposes that the world cannot be understood if you only think in terms of things like harmonies and differences that can never be resolved. It encourages us to recognize that everything is prone to contradiction, even the things that seem harmonious. In summary, dialectical materialism looks at the world dialectically. Dialectically or dialectics just means looking at the world in terms of all its contradictions and opposing forces. So, when we emphasize that to understand reality and society, material conditions are the most important elements. That's the materialism part of dialectical materialism. And meanwhile, when we say that material conditions are dynamic and they are always changing, they are dialectical. That is the dialectical part of dialectical materialism. So these two words just come together to make up dialectical materialism. These two terms, I mean. So now, to expatiate on what diamat is, I'm going to talk about what is largely the major antithesis or the major opponent of dialectical materialism, which is contemporary Western social science, Western philosophy. One of the main weaknesses of mainstream Western social science, which, by the way, has found its way into African social science, because wherever Western capitalism goes to, its ideology, its philosophy must follow. Um, so one of the major weaknesses of Western social science is that it discourages dialectical thinking. It discourages this way of thinking because Western social science is committed to justifying and preserving the ideology of the existing social and economic order, capitalism. Because of this commitment that it has, Western social science has bias towards placing societies in categories like democratic and totalitarian political systems, which are supposed to be rigid, separate, and different systems that are distinctly separate and different from each other. So it calls the democratic system good and it calls the totalitarian system bad. And of course, the categories of political systems and societies that is associated are good are then associated with Western society. But the thing about categorizing Western society as being good in and of itself is that it traps Western social science into drawing a distinction and a difference between the preferred category of society, which is theirs, and other categories. It also minimizes and limits the possibility that change can happen, because if there's a possibility of the currently preferred category changing for the better, this means that there was something wrong with it in the first place. Western social science has very distinct, different, and rigidly fixed categories. And analyzing society this way is definitely not enough if you want to understand the complex world that is full of change and dynamism. Okay, moving on. The deficiencies of Western social science is very clear when you look at the way it studies non-Western societies, especially when it is studying societies that are not really economically advanced. These are the societies called underdeveloped. When studying these societies, it becomes clear that most of Western social science is biased towards studying order rather than studying change. We live in a world that's full of change, in a world that's very dynamic. But Western social science still focuses on studying order rather than studying change. Of course, this deficiency of Western social science is recognized by Western social science itself. It recognizes this deficiency. So it tries to counter this problem. So in trying to counter the problem, this deficiency of not of not studying change, Western social science then introduced theories of change. These theories of change were just purely focused on introducing intermediary categories that implied that there is a higher preferred state or stage of society that these intermediaries are trying to reach, and that other societies have not reached that preferred stage. Examples of this are books like Stages of Economic Growth, written by Walt Rostow, and Stages of Political Development by Kenneth Organsky. This attempt to fix itself and introduce dynamism and change and actual theories of change just ended up showing how inadequate Western social science is. So when Western social science goes around forming different categories of stages of development and saying that forming society in a certain way is necessary if you want to meet up to the preferred stages or to the preferred category of stage, this kind of placing societies into categories is not a proper theory of change. It doesn't teach anything about social change. All it does is show the ideological bias of Western social science, because it's just trying to say that Western societies are the peak of social evolution and the rest of us should try, the goal for the rest of us is trying to attain or trying to get as close to Western society as we can. Also, as if to completely confirm how much it lacks any interest in actual change and dynamism, contemporary Western social science hardly ever talks about how Western society itself can change, because it is seen as the preferred category. Since it's the preferred category, there's no need for it to change. The only societies that need to change are societies that are not yet like Western society. So, all of these problems come up when you follow, all of these problems that come up when you follow Western social science to think that the world is static are now affecting people who are studying societies that are not Western. Because you need dialectics to actually study these societies, and because they have so many moving and changing parts. These societies that are not Western are very, very dynamic. Because they are not fully economically developed, these societies are constantly changing. And when you use a philosophy or a social science that says that is more interested in studying the order of things rather than change of things, or even comes up with theories of change that are not really theories of change, it won't work when trying to study dynamic societies. Finally, because Diamat considers the main importance of material conditions and also focuses on the way this material reality can change, dialectical materialism shows that it is the best and only option if you want to truly study and understand society. So that's all for now. In my next video, in the next video, I'll be talking about the interrelatedness of everything, how things in the world, things in society, and things in reality are interrelated, using the understanding of materialism and dialectics, still from Ake. So yeah, that's all for now. Okay, so I have mentioned contradictions a lot. I talk about contradictions a lot, and I assume that we probably do know what a contradiction is, something that's in disagreement. But what does contradiction mean in social science? What does contradiction mean in dialectical materialism? When dialecticians say the word contradiction, what do we mean? So let me use examples to make it clearer. Major example of a contradiction is the contradiction between the people who have and people who don't, between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The interests of these two classes are in opposition to each other. The interests of both these classes cannot be accomplished at the same time. One has to overpower the other, and because right now this contradiction is being resolved all over the world by the violence of nation states using the police, using the army. The proletariat can only resolve this contradiction in its favor through revolution. Another example of a contradiction that we see every day, or not every day, we see every day that we have seen over the course of time, is the contradiction between our social economic system, between capitalism and the planet we live in. Capitalism implies unlimited growth. It implies that human economy can just keep growing and growing and growing, and wealth of people can keep growing. It implies that this growth is unlimited. But we live on a planet. Earth is a planet with not very, but with limited resources. So now, a way this contradiction is being resolved is by climate change. Climate change is not the earth being destroyed. No. Climate change is the earth making itself inhabitable for the people, for human beings that are practicing this social economic system that is destroying it. So it is one of two things. Either we continue with capitalism and destroy the planet, or the planet makes itself inhabitable for us, and it is doing this right now through climate change. So I hope these examples helped understand what contradictions mean and how all of society is full of contradictions. There are contradictions like this everywhere in society. Unless these contradictions are resolved, there can be no harmony. All right.